Well, guys, we are back for another episode of the Liberal Asshole Show, episode 46. So, what are today's topics?
Russo-Ukraine update, Bill O'Reilly being Karen, the rise of isms on the left, Charlie Kirk being transphobic, unions keep winning, Feel the Burn 2024, and Noam Chomsky getting ratioed.
Alright, so, got a lot of updates now for the Russo-Ukraine wars. We take a look at the map. Although right now there is no change that we know of on the map, or at least if there is, it's not really noticeable. However, Russia is supposedly, like a few days ago, started their new offensive where they're trying to take over Donetsk and Luhansk, the breakaway areas, and take as much of eastern Ukraine as possible. But they're probably doing like the small stuff first because, like I said, there hasn't been really any changes to the map whatsoever. And also,
Mariupol.
oh yeah, it's still fighting on. Surprisingly, everyone keeps saying,
There's one tiny little area left. The steelworks, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, everyone keeps saying, it's getting fall any day now. That's been like a week or two straight they said it, and it's still holding on. So hey, the longer it holds on, the longer it is. So
well, to be honest though, apparently Putin's decided, you know what, they can have the steel plant. We've got the rest of Mariupol. Now we're just going to start massacring Nazis, which of course they think all Ukrainians are Nazis. So,
and speaking of which, Jackson Hinkle's been praising Putin for Mariupol crap. If you didn't know,
of course Jacob Hickey has been doing that.
Oh my god! Now, of course, there is one thing I was reading up while I was getting ready for mail earlier. Supposedly, a Russian general said, now of course, take this with a grain of salt because it might not mean anything, that Russia still has in mind to take over all of southern Ukraine, not only into Odessa, but get to Transnistria and invade Moldova.
Oh God. They're still going to try. So they're still aiming to take Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia.
Well, no idea about.
They're also doing because Russia's also doing the pre-stuff that they did with Ukraine. They're doing it to Georgia.
Yeah.
So they might be planning to pull out of Ukraine and invade. Once they've taken Moldova, they'll then go and take Georgia.
So now, of
course, and then probably swing back to try to finish Ukraine off.
Now, of course, we have no idea how they would be able to do this. I mean, they're having this much of a hard time just to even take over parts of Ukraine because they have to really push into southern Ukraine to even reach Moldova. So all the stuff I was reading up while I was doing now, a lot of people don't even think that that's really possible for them to even do that, even if they want to. It's more like just like threats, basically, like to scare like Moldova and all of them, and not necessarily actually try and get it because they might not be able to. But
well, the thing is that Moldova doesn't have a standing army or something like that. They're like the poorest nation in Europe, so
yeah, they only got like
Russia just walk into Moldova and not really face resistance. Of course, they can't go any further than that because Romania is in NATO.
So we should give Moldova everything we can just in case. Because, yeah, Ukraine might be able to stop them, but Moldova most certainly would probably not.
Moldova doesn't stand a chance, and I don't think, I'm not sure Georgia will be able to fight back this time.
Yeah, Moldova.
We've already been beaten down once.
Because we talked about several weeks ago, whatever it was, that Moldova has only 6,000 active troops, believe it or not, for crying out loud.
Yeah, they don't have a proper standing army.
Yeah, so they got
and as we know, and plans from Belarus that once they took Ukraine, they were going to take Moldova, and then they were going to swing around and take Georgia. Yeah, so, using the same thing they used on Ukraine as well.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully Ukraine can keep up the fighting, as we're still waiting to see how they can hold off for May 9th, since that's the date Russia's Victory Day celebrations happen from World War II. But that's the update for right now, so we'll see what happens next time. So now we're going to the next topic, which these two you brought first off. So what do you want to start off with first?
Bill O'Reilly being a Karen.
Alright, so what is Bill O'Reilly being a Karen about now?
Delayed flight.
Oh,
Delayed
God.
flight on thing.
You want to do
Oh, no, Bill. Big deal. So, anyways, the majority report. So, let's see how much of a Karen Bill O'Reilly's being now.
you want to do this Bill O'Reilly thing?
I like this Bill O'Reilly.
Okay.
Before we start, let me guess. Is it something related to COVID?
No, it's literally just the flight getting delayed, possibly related to COVID, because let's be honest, most of the delays are related to COVID these days. But yeah.
And also, was there any woman around there that he was bugging?
No, I think it was another man.
Bill O'Reilly has reemerged.
We don't need another Me Too moment with him.
He is at the JetBlue counter.
Giving himself a sexual harassment lawsuit.
It's all good. But which airport is this at? I guess it doesn't really matter. I think he's a product of Long Island, though.
Apparently, he's going to Turks and Caicos.
Naturally.
You can maybe look up a little bit more on this. JFK.
JFK. And he totally Karen'd on this JetBlue employee.
Susan, it's Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly and Matt Fry.
He looks so much like shit since I last saw him on Fox. He looks awful in that grainy
Well,
video.
he's kind of been struggling since he lost his thing.
Yeah.
Want to see a manager.
No. What you're going to do is 3 hours late now. No. You're going to find out. You look it up. You want me to find oh, yeah? You're trying to do violence. No, I'm not. You're the one. I dare you. I dare you. Is that what you said? Okay. You get that information. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your job. Okay? We'll see.
Good to know he's still a cantankerous bully. He loves getting in
It's
people's
like
faces.
getting really angry at a guy for a delayed flight.
Yeah.
While
That sense of
being a car,
entitlement,
so.
it's that's thicker. Blood is thicker than water, while his entitlement is thicker than his blood. That's gonna remain until he dies. That's the soul, a cloud of entitlement that leaves his body when he drops into hell.
I'm impressed. Yeah, he was upright. I mean, I don't know if he could have passed a sobriety test entirely, but the one of just standing and bitching the guy out.
I'm surprised he didn't ask for a woman employee for once.
Because he looked like he was declining fast when I saw any clip of him. And,
yes, he definitely looked in horrible shape that video.
That's his energy source.
He's really gone.
Bullying people.
He's really gone downhill since he got fired for sexually harassing 100 women.
But that's what men at Fox like to do, remember?
People. That's how he.
You're gonna lose your job.
Yeah. So.
Like you did.
Right.
Anyway.
He's like, and I would know.
I know about losing jobs.
I could go off about the airlines right now, but this is why we need more regulation of this massive industry in this country.
Oh no, the R
It's the
word! That
redundancy.
triggers
They
reform
fired off all their workers.
conservatives!
Now they can't get the planes off the ground. Yeah.
And don't get them started on the mask that Bill O'Reilly and all them were wearing.
Left wing Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah, left wing Bill. That could be something. Yeah. What did he? What did he scream on air? We'll do it live.
Fuck it. Fucking thing sucks. We'll do it
Sorry,
live.
We'll do it live. Yeah.
Fucking thing sucks.
We'll take
Fuck
off
it.
now.
Do it live.
Sucks.
What does that mean to play us out? Yeah, I know a lot of that. That's an all-time meltdown.
All time.
If only we could have heard what he was saying, because that would have probably been so funny, but sucks that video was just so really green and all that. Do you know or found out what he was crying about?
Hang on, give me a moment. It was the
We saw he was pointing and screaming "fuck you" or whatever. Well, not screaming, but saying "fuck you" to the one employee he was screaming and yelling at. So we needed to hear him scream and yell. And
flight to Turks and Caicos was delayed. You effing scumbag! You were going to lose your job.
Hey, Bill, you forgot the ultimate Karen energy and asked for a manager, remember?
Yeah.
And you should go get yourself checked out, Bill, because you really, really, really look awful in the years since I last saw you. Like, it's noticeable bad. Ugh. Age is not doing you so well. Alright, so
No,
I guess
it's not.
I guess we're done with that short video. So now, what's the next thing you brought up?
Okay, so what do you think about Dylan Burns TV?
I am not really that much of a fan of him, though, unfortunately. Because I remember...
It's like, I've got respect because he's now in Poland interviewing people about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's the main thing I watch him a bit, but mostly it's just like background music.
Because I remember the first time I saw him, he was on Vosh when they talked about Lukashenko rigging the elections in Belarus 2 years ago. So I subscribed to him for a bit. Then a few months later, he did a video going after Kyle about him denying Russia Gate and all that, and he explicitly said in the first minute of the video that he was pro military intervention. All right, unsubscribe, no longer hearing you. You're a piece of shit in my eyes. Don't want to hear it ever again. I'll ever take you seriously if you support that crap. Fuck off.
Nope.
So yeah, he's been pretty much a piece of shit as far as my eyes. So what? The video's involving him?
Yeah, because the video is called "Hey Twitter, calling gay people slurs is bad." And basically, it's a guy who's... Let's see if I remember what happened. Guy is running against Bobert, I think it is. And he's like Dylan. He seems to be... I don't know, I don't have all the details, but he's like Republican. I think he's a corporate Dem, and people were going after him, and they've gone after Dylan in the past on Twitter, and they're using various slurs. And I've noticed this a fair bit among tankies, where, for example, they'll attack, for example, AOC, but they'll throw a bit of racial, throw a little bit of sexism into their attack.
Well,
or the big one is this thing I've noticed: steadily rising tide. This is gonna sound insane, but the steadily rising tide of anti-Semitism, basically, almost like taking far-right conspiracy theories about people like George Soros and the Rockefellers, and then repurposing them for left-wing anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
Which Hinkle has done a lot over the last few months or so.
Yep.
And I'm not surprised tankies do that, because tankies are social authoritarians as well.
Yep.
Alright, so let's see this video.
Now, I just did that criticism. At no point did I have to mention this guy's sexuality. At no point did I need to mention the fact that the dude's gay. At no point did the part that says I'm the gay Democrat need to come into my criticism. I want to talk to you guys about this. And so what I'm showing you right now is a Democrat that is running against Lauren Boebert. Okay, wonderful. I want to see people run against Lauren Boebert. Lauren Boebert is one of the most far-right Republicans within the Republican Party. Somebody you most certainly would like to see get removed from Congress. I support Democrats generally against every Republican running. I would like to see the Democratic House majority increase. I would like to see the Democrat Senate majority go from 50-50 to 52, 53, 54, so we can, pass more legislation. I want to see more Democratic Supreme Court appointments, and so beating someone like Lauren Boebert, wonderful. Love to see people running against Lauren Boebert, even if his odds are probably pretty slim. As far as I know about this guy isn't doesn't have a massive following. He is not very extremely wealthy from what I know, but I like to see people throw their hats in the ring in order to beat Republicans. He decided, for whatever reason, to make a post about, running against Lauren Boebert, and specifically about, more progressive members of the party who support things, like Medicare for all, stuff like that. And he made a very short 30-second clip on TikTok about this.
I love when people are like, you have a moderate policy, you lost my vote. Oh, what vote was that? Was that the vote you were going to give to some Bernie wannabe whose overkill policies are unpopular with 75% of voters? Just
Not true either, dipshit.
so you can feel good about yourself until they lose the general election, at which point you'll point your finger and blame someone else? That vote? Oh, honey, your vote got lost a long time ago. Democrats need to wake up. Jesus, in order to legislate, we have to win. Go to walkerforcolorado.com and stop complaining.
Woo!
Okay, so I could not create a more smarmy, out of touch feeling political message to be pumping out while you're on the campaign trail. If this was something he said and he was like a streamer, or this was years before he ran for office, I'd be like, okay, while I might disagree with him on this, this, and that, this isn't like just terrible optics for a political campaign. But let me just be clear, this is terrible optics for a political campaign. Not only are you going to be alienating it with putting out a message like this, a decent size of the Democratic base across the country now, especially young voters who agree with the more, on average, at a higher rate, agree more with the Bernie wing. And you would probably need their vote in every vote you could possibly.
You would need our vote. And yeah, the way you've made that message so far, you definitely would probably lose my vote in that regard. So, sucks to be you, dumbass.
Get in order to win the seat Lauren Boebert has. But you're also just talking down, like just talking down to these people tremendously. If this was just some random political commentator, I wouldn't care. But if you're running for office, while you're running for office, and probably even before, but I'm more forgiving of that because, everybody, just snips back and forth on social media, just terribly smarmy. Like the read I get off this guy is just this very much, I'm floating above you all, I'm mightier than thou, which is the same accusation he's throwing against the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. Now, I will say there is part of this I agree with, which is that when it comes to swing areas or states that are, or like districts that are more moderate or conservative leaning, you do need to be able to compromise on some of the policies you would want to see in the most blue districts.
Bernie does better in those swing states than people like him. So why would he? Why would we need to compromise when we do better in those places?
Most evident, not actually with economic policy, which I think a lot of people would point to most evidently, because I would say that a lot of like conservative districts and moderate districts are extremely pro-union. Very much would like to see expansions of the ACA and a public option, or eventually even a path to Medicare for all. But that one's more divisive because there's been a lot of messaging on the idea of like, hey, Medicare for all, you can't have your own personal insurance that you fought for as a union. The messaging against Medicare for all by Republicans and even certain Democrats has been very effective. But a lot of the economic ones, I would say 80 to 90% of progressive economic policies are supported by the vast majority of Americans. The things that really are the razor edge issues, which you got to be careful about, are social issues, right? If I'm going to be completely frank with you guys, if I was speaking in front of a bunch of coal miners in West Virginia, I would not open up my speech talking about neopronouns or like anything surrounding, say, I don't know, trans bathroom bills. And that's not to say that I don't.
Yeah, Dylan's correct on this. This is what we've been telling like the left for years now. Stuff like that which you flaunt all the time does not work with people like in conservative areas. It turns them off. Even though the majority of the country does support those things, you have to tailor your message to trying to appeal to them to get your vote. That's why Bernie did so well in the in conservative parts of the country, even though he's for all those things that Dylan says. He just doesn't rub it in their face like people like AOC does. And that's why he's one of the most popular senators in the country, and she's not. You gotta message you gotta appeal to what they want to hear.
Care about stopping trans bathroom bills. That's not to say I don't care about these issues. It's just to say that you need to understand your audience and what your audience's priorities are, and you need to speak to those priorities. And then when you're in office, you can possibly legislate in favor of those progressive social policies.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying for years. If we're gonna win, we have to get some conservative voters. There's no way around it. How are we gonna get those voters? By doing what Burns says, focus on the economic issues and not flaunt the social issues like in their face. And then once we win and get their votes, then we can go get in and do everything we need to do, including social issues. But every time I point that out, people just say that I don't give a shit about social issues at all and want to like leave them behind, stuff like that, which they say the same things about Kyle because they're fucking idiots. I can't stand them.
They didn't speak about a ton on the campaign trail, understanding that could drive away some of your voter base. Being tactical, being careful about what type of messaging you put out in order to attract the wider base of people, since like not all districts, not all counties, not all states are the same, and they're going to have different issues. The most evident issue I would point to, this might be surprising for some Democrats in my audience or some lefty people in my audience, is gun control. Like, gun control is something you just have to be able to compromise on in a lot of these states. If you live in Texas, saying stuff like, we're going to take your AR-15 or campaign killers, okay? I'm already generally
focus on the economics, not on the social.
pro-gun to like moderate on gun control already. Like, I listened to statements by Beto O'Rourke on AR-15s when he was on the presidential campaign trail, and now I see him running for governor, and all I can imagine is just campaign ads circling on him. On, I'm going to take your AR-15 away. I'm going to take your AR-15 away. I'm going to take your AR-15 away.
That's another thing too. That's why you shouldn't like say stuff that would probably kill your campaign. Just be like very general when it comes to like gun rights and stuff like that, and don't say like something like that, like not open, but like your full policies. That way they won't know, so they can't say you support that because they don't know.
Hey. And whether or not you're a David Hogg Democrat or you're or you think that like more gun.
But it's also true at the same time, I need to mention too, even if they don't like say they're going to take away your AR-15 or anything like that, you know conservatives are just going to lie and say they're going to take your guns away no matter what. Yeah. It's like they keep calling Biden a socialist and communist when he's neither.
Control can help stop school shootings and you know, you actually need to take your AR-15 away. That might play well in certain districts of New York. That might play well in California. That's not going to play well in Texas. Point blank, period, end of paragraph. So there is some truth to what he's saying, but that some truth is like, I would say, a kernel within a veneer of smarminess that he's accusing the other side of being. He's accusing somebody of being mightier than thou and smarmy while acting as smarmy as physically possible. And I think it's reductionist because I don't think this also applies to the same extent with economic issues. I would say 90% of progressive economic issues, the vast majority of people agree with. Another example of this is that ending the drug war is largely popular, but it's considered a very progressive thing. A great example is Joe Biden's position on the drug war, or the vast majority of Republicans' position on the drug war. 197 Republicans voted against marijuana legalization. That's the majority of Republicans. Now, I just did that criticism, and at no point in this, like, hey, I agree with him a little bit here, but on this larger thing, here's why the optics on this are terrible, and here's a little bit I disagree with, right? There was like a development of dialogue, so to speak. At no point did I have to mention this guy's sexuality. At no point did I need to mention the fact that the dude's gay. At no point did the part that says I'm the gay Democrat need to come into my criticism. At all. It didn't. Especially as a left-wing person. If you're like far right and you don't like gay people and you don't like queer people where they make you uncomfortable, then you have an avenue of like criticism you can make. It's terrible criticism, but you have an avenue for criticism. At no point during anything I said did I have any reason to bring that up. A lot of people had the same reaction I did, or a different reaction, and this is what he responded to them as. This is what he said in response.
Yesterday, I got canceled for making the outrageous claim that ultra-progressive candidates can't win in blood red districts like mine, and that if you vote for one, you're throwing your vote away. Yeah. Every vote matters, but don't throw yours away on some ultra-liberal pipe dream who has no shot just to make yourself feel warm and fuzzy at night. In order to legislate, Democrats must win. And in order to win, we need to nominate candidates who represent the district and play smart with common sense policies that can win. Not some platform designed to placate your overwoke Twitter temper tantrum pipe dreams. And we need someone strong enough to stand up to the bullshit.
If anything, you're kind of woke since you keep bringing up that you're a gay Dem. Yeah. Like, that's identity politics. I would consider that very woke. That you keep bringing up your identity when I don't care. As Dylan points out, I don't care if you're gay. I don't care whatsoever. I care about your policies. And from the sounds of it, your policies are probably garbage. So why should I vote for you? Especially since you pretty much told me to go fuck myself just a little bit ago.
Including Lauren Boebert's bullshit, but also including the bullshit in our own party trying...
What?
Means he should go fuck himself with a cactus.
to tear down Democrats with a shot. TLDR, I'm not sorry, and I've got my eye on the only prize that matters.
Okay, to be completely honest, he didn't really say anything new of importance. He just basically reiterated his old point and just, you know, same thing. He did it less smarmy. There's still some smarminess, but he did it less smarmy. But he doubled down on the same thing. Anyway, this video was then replied to by this person and a bunch of other people. And some of them, and this is something I've seen kind of like bubbling up more online, some people have started saying things like this. No one canceled you. Everyone just called you a smarmy, annoying, and then it's a cigarette. Now, if you were in Great Britain or just know about...
oh man, that's not good. So since no one in America is probably going to notice, but at the end of that comment, a smarmy, annoying, it's a cigarette. But for anyone who doesn't know, in the UK, cigarette is also has a slang term called fag. Yeah, I'm not kidding. So yeah, if someone says
this
that,
is what I was referring to.
Yeah. So if
of these several isms on the left towards certain people.
Yeah. Using slur that most people are probably not going to know outside of the UK. That is cringe.
I don't know, Great Britain and what they call cigarettes there. I think you can figure out what that cigarette was supposed to represent. I would say it if I was on YouTube, but I'm on Twitch, and so we know
maybe that's
exactly
why you shouldn't be on Twitch, Dylan, because Twitch sucks.
Yes.
Now, I've seen a few other people using the F slur in reference to him. I saw other people saying, like, this guy sounds like he wakes up every morning with a dick in his ass, or just, like, some pretty, like, I would say blatant homophobia. I wanted to talk about this because this has actually happened to me on a few occasions, where I remember a while ago, I think I even made a video about it, I made, like, a very milquetoast meme about Garfield on the internet. Yes, a meme about... No, it wasn't Garfield, it was Bugs Bunny. I like Garfield too much. It was Bugs Bunny. Some of you might remember this. And a lot of people responded to that in a pretty homophobic way. And people will do this. It's very interesting. These disgusting white gays. Like, if you put white in front of a word, then it's like okay to attack them for that. It's like putting the silencer on the F slur, right? Like, you put white in front of it and it's not nearly as bad. It's perfectly fine. It's silly. It should be pretty obvious. Calling gay people derogatory slurs about them being gay is bad. I'm a little surprised I have to explain why calling people derogatory slurs is bad, but I guess I'll do that. When you do that, it creates a social stigma around gay people that is negative, that being gay is bad.
And of course with Fox, which maybe should bring up in the next episode, hate crimes against gays have gone because of people on Fox saying like, oh, they're grooming kids and all that. Yeah. Like, come on. Yeah. All you progressives on the left, can you not do this stuff, please? Like, come on. Like,
calm down on the homophobia, calm down on the sexism, and calm down on, especially on the anti-Semitism.
And also racism against whites, which I'm sure Dylan was referring to a moment ago as well. Because I see that a lot.
And you can also be very hurtful to gay people in question.
And not only that, it makes you look dumb. Like, you should focus on the policies. Like, we could tear this guy a new asshole just like Dylan just did. We didn't have to bring up he's gay or use slurs, because we don't care.
The thing that people try to like, you know, get spicy with it, right? Well, the difference here is that the people criticizing them are either A, left wing, or B, gay. I don't care. I do not care at all. Why should I care? Do you think anybody reading this tweet knows if this Ben person is gay or not? I don't know if they're gay. Somebody later told me they're gay, but do you think that impacts if a random person on Twitter sees this tweet? If they're like, I can tell from just reading this tweet that the person making this is gay, and so they don't mean it in a homophobic way when they call them the F slur, they mean it in a not homophobic. I don't even know how you would mean it in a not homophobic way. I think they just want to call them the F slur. Maybe it's just like, I can't say it because I'm them, you're the bad one, right? You're the bad gay, I'm the good gay. I assume maybe it's something like that. I don't... really want to make what's the old saying? You can't make sense of nonsense, is the old boomer saying, right? And you being left wing has no bearing on it whatsoever, right? If somebody came out left wing and started calling JLP for being right wing the N-word, that would be bad because it increases the social stigmatization around black people and you're hitting a very, let's say, sore spot.
Honestly, though, Jesse Lee Peterson might view that as a compliment too, which is just as cringy.
Well, remember that Jesse Lee Peterson, not only is he there, if what I've heard is true, he's actually like legitimately brain damaged.
Yep, I remember.
Apparently he had a major accident when he was a young adult, and it damaged and stuffed his brain. That's why it's got I've heard like everything from, I think it was a tractor falling off a tractor and getting hit. Someone said it had a stroke, and that's why it was the weird talking. And it's like, that's the thing, like, I know he says a lot of terrible things. But it's like, with Jesse Lee Peterson, you almost depending on whatever happened to him, like, I got the sense when I first saw him, like, I thought, like, this guy's, like, had a stroke, like, quite a bad one, and that's why he's got he talks and things like he does. Yeah. As I said, he's got apparently a pretty bad past, but doesn't justify his beliefs, but it's, like, kind of understandable.
History. Gay people have been lynched with that word. Gay people have been murdered with that word, not only in the United States, but internationally. That word has been used to stigmatize them and pass laws that oppress them and outlaws homosexual activity. We all remember Stonewall. I don't need to get into like the history of oppression in the United States really that much. I think you guys all understand. It is not okay just because you're gay or because you're left wing to call gay people slurs, or really to call anyone slurs. Now somebody might say to me, well, Dylan, the difference is when they're gay, they're within the gay community, so they can make the determinations of da-da-da-da-da. Okay, again, I don't care. You are doing active harm. It's not good. I mean, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm here having to explain why calling gay people the F slur is bad. And I have to explain it to left-wingers and other queer people. I don't understand why I'm here doing this, but apparently I have to, because this has happened to me. This has happened to other gay people and other queer people and other bisexual people I know. This has happened to a bunch of people on the internet now. It's something I'm seeing more and more and more and more of, that you can go out and just calling people slurs that has been used historically to fucking slaughter them because you're gay or you're left wing, so everyone knows you're not homophobic, so that's perfectly fine. Yep. Do you think everyone reading this tweet is going to see that? You know, if some groyper stumbled upon this, there's a 90% chance they're gonna like it if they don't know you're gay. And they don't have no reason to know you're gay. They're just gonna be like, haha, he called him the F slur, and they're gonna like it. And it encourages that behavior. It's only going to be very insular internet communities that see this and there's like, this is totally normal behavior. This is totally normal, like acceptable behavior. It isn't acceptable. I don't agree with it, but I think maybe some of their logic might be taking the word back. This is the caveat I wanted to add. If you're saying it in a way that's like, oh yeah, I'm such an F slur, or you're using it kind of, you know how like people use the N word like as like a term of endearment, right? If you're saying it like that, you're taking it back. You're trying to take the power away from it. You're trying to make it so that word does not have that pain for you, and you're trying to use it as a term of endearment. That's different. That's different because you're not using it to hurt people. You're not using it as an attack. You're not attacking these sore spots that queer people have due to the history of homophobia. Gay marriage just came about in 2015.
What matters is the context of how you use slurs. That's what matters, first and foremost.
And conversion therapy is still legal in the United States. There are still anti-LGBTQ hate crimes and killings in this country, and most certainly internationally. We're seeing the grooming discourse coming about. We're seeing how people are talking about members of the LGBTQ plus community on places like Fox. For example, on Fox News, there was over 170 170 anti-trans stories played in just 3 weeks. And that's just anti-trans. That's not even including anti-gay or other members of the LGBTQ plus community, right? This is an active, ongoing discourse. And this is a word that people still use as a weapon. When I was at the Capitol during January 6th in my Biden hoodie, I had far-right people there yelling that word at me. And they didn't even know necessarily I was gay. They just saw my long hair. Maybe they heard my mannerisms because I do code switch a certain amount when I'm not on stream. And they didn't throw it at me in this way of like, hey, I'm left wing, I'm pro-gay, or I am gay, so it's totally cool to say. No, they threw it at me because they wanted to hurt me. Stab at like what they saw as a weak spot in my character, which was being gay. LGBTQ plus, queer, bi, whatever. So taking it back only works if you're like using it as a term of endearment, not as an insult. If you're using it as an insult and still as a weapon, then you're not taking it back. You're just using homophobia as a spear against other queer people. That's not taking it back. That's not a term of endearment. You're just yelling slurs or throwing slurs at queer people. Hey, everybody get your bingo cards out. Dylan brought up January 6th. True. I'm gonna bring it up all day today. Every day, I'm gonna bring up January 6th till I die. What's his policies? I'm to the point where I don't care right now. He's like a Democratic moderate. He's like a moderate, right? But again, then just go after his policies, right? Yeah. Just because he speaks in a flamboyant fashion, right? Or he is like he's identifying himself as gay doesn't mean that's the thing you should attack. If anything, that is not a weak spot on his character. I don't consider it a weak spot. You're going after like the one spot about that clip that is not the weak spot. You're making yourself look worse and him look better. Like if I say, hey guys, I'm a queer Democrat running in Maryland's 1st, 2nd, 3rd, whatever district. And my policy is that we should bring nuclear energy more to Maryland. I think we should make Maryland a nuclear energy hub. And the reasons is A, B, C, and D.
Huh?
Oh, does he live if he's actually in the lives in Maryland, he lives in the same state as you.
Yeah, and I already knew that. He worked for Ben Jealous.
Ah, cool.
And you disagree with my nuclear energy plan. And you're like, man, your nuclear energy...
Just like you know who else is in my state?
Who?
Hunter.
Oh yeah, Hunter Avalone.
...plan is stupid, you fucking... And then you call me the F-slur, right? There's a problem there. You could have just criticized my nuclear policy, but instead you just went for homophobic attacks on top of it, doing nothing but giving me ammunition, because then I could just point at you and be like, Lamau, homophobe. Now I can just say, look, it's not...
You just provide ammo for people like Dylan and the idiot that he just covered to dismiss you.
It's not about my policy, is it? It's about the fact that I'm queer. Gotcha. I'm seeing more and more and more people legitimately just calling other people the F-slur, not as a term of endearment, but as an actual attack. And when there's people in this country still being murdered for being queer, when we still have people internationally being murdered for being queer, oppressed for being queer, when we're still seeing like gay conversion therapy active in the United States. It's banned in Canada. We should take that policy to the United States, by the way, but it's not banned in the United States. And so I'm seeing this more and more and more. I've had it happen to me where people...
And it is banned in Maryland, too. I think New Jersey as well. There are some states that did ban gay conversion therapy.
Who are queer and or left-wing use it as an attack. They don't know how that word's been used against me. They have no clue if maybe when I was a kid, I was like 12 or 13 years old and I said a boy was cute, and a family member came in and just started, you fucking, and started just throwing that slur at me. The people have no clue what kind of pain I could hold to that word. Zero. Part of it, I think people just maybe want to be edgy, but this is like really weird, like, this isn't okay. This is bad. People online are trying to use all kinds of slurs more and more. The F-slur, tons of ableist slurs, phrases like schizo-posting. It's increasing with time too. I think a lot of it is just like these words are just so deeply entrenched in our culture. Like some words I think can like change meaning over time. For example, dumb, right? I don't really think there's much damage done by the word dumb because I don't really feel like most people actually associate the word dumb much with like mental disabilities. More it's now associated with just levels of like being unintelligent. You know what I mean? But like words like retard, it's like very clearly like that. But like it's things we learn over
I
time
use
that's very
retard
hard
in
to
the same
fall
way as
out
I
of.
use dumb,
I think
you know,
people are just trying to find like ways around it. You know how like Iran invades sanctions by using like different bank accounts and like trying to like find subsidiaries to go through and other stuff like that or whatever. I'm not an economics expert. Maybe this is like the version of gamers like trying to avoid sanctions when it comes to slurs, right? Where they can't say the F slur anymore and they can't call people retard anymore. So now they're like evading the slur sanctions by moving over to schizo posting, you know? Spaz, exactly. That was the old one in the early 2000s. Yeah, the slur sanctions, exactly. Yeah. And I'd say Destiny would be like the mullah of avoiding these sanctions. The slur sanctions.
Alright, so yeah, that was, those comments too on Twitter were cringe.
Yeah.
So, what you guys say about that?
Well, as I've said, like this is something I've noticed as well. Almost like the in a way the poison of a lot of the far right has started to creep into certain left wing spaces as well.
Like Harry,
Right.
like Harry, remember when he called
Yep.
when he called
He's
Fauci a faggot?
Yep. He's also started drifting down the anti-Semitism route as well.
Oh, really?
Yep. He's started pushing the global, the left-wing version of the newer of the. I don't think.
What the
Yeah,
great?
it will be the 2030.
Let me guess, the Great Reset.
Yep. Great Reset. Leftist version of the Great Reset.
Oh boy, I've noticed it too, but almost just mostly exclusively just people for being white, not necessarily anything else. Unfortunately,
That's the thing. Like, I think that part's been there, and that's mostly a almost like a. The intention is good, but it's aimed in the wrong direction.
yeah.
And it's supposed to either also generalizations.
Yep.
But then, but now it's gotten into toxic areas as well, with race, with sexism, still going against men. More so, homophobia now seems to be increasingly okay, and anti-Semitism, like actual anti-Semitism, not we oppose Israel's far-right government genociding the Palestinians.
But that is anti-Semitic, remember? Many boys said so.
Don't be a shit. Don't be a shit. I don't even use lib at this point because you're not even just a fucking liberal.
Oh God. So yeah. Please. So anybody, please don't throw out the isms for like actual slur use and stuff like that. If you want to destroy people like on policies, focus on the policies. It's not that hard to do. Just like when we had to make fun of Dylan Burns earlier before we watched the video because he said some things that caused me to unsubscribe for him. Alright, so now, it's time to get into some more isms. This time, Charlie Kirk being transphobic.
Charlie Kirk being transphobic for the 86,954th time at least.
But do you want to know why he's transphobic? And you know what he blamed them for?
What?
Inflation!
Alright! Because transphobes blame transgender people for everything. Literally.
So, Charlie, it's trans fault for inflation. I would love to hear your argument, and Kyle would too.
So Charlie Kirk was doing his radio show, I guess, the other day, and he said something that is astonishing, even for Charlie Kirk.
It's not. I'm not
He
surprised.
tries to link trans people to the issue of inflation and blames like the same sort of mindset that leads to people being trans leads to inflation happening in the country. I don't know. You guys watch, and then I'll respond.
So one of the reasons why we take such a strong stance and opinion on the trans issue is it's an issue of reality. You do not get to determine your own
No, you have an issue on because you're a transphobic piece of shit.
reality. Do not get to all of a sudden say, I'm rich or I'm poor. No, we actually have to look at some evidence of whether or not you're rich or poor. Now, some of those are relative terms. Rich according to who? Rich according to what? I understand that. But relatively, some of the terms we use, short, tall, You can't just make them up. You say, oh, wow, that person is taller than that person. That person is faster than that person. That person is stronger than that person. And one of the reasons why we've been so insistent against this idea you could change your gender or change your sex or change both of them is that when you start to indulge in the belief that you could become whatever you want and reality is subjective, not objective, you're going to have ramifications that nobody anticipated or intended. So there's a direct connection to inflation and the trans issue.
Really?
They couldn't be further apart.
Really?
They're exactly the same.
I would like some
They're
evidence
the
on
same
that
in
one,
this
boy.
aspect.
Oh.
When you believe that men can become women,
Everything
why wouldn't you also believe that you
blamed
could
the
print
world
wealth?
is the fault of transgender people?
If you believe
They're not transphobic
Same in this
fuckwits like you.
All right, let's see let's see how it is the
Aspect.
case.
when you believe that men can become women,
Which they can.
why wouldn't you also believe that you could print wealth? If you believe that someone can change their gender, why wouldn't you also believe that money is wealth? Now, there are very
That's not
simple
even the
laws of
reason why
economics,
inflation's happening,
just
but
like there's
okay.
laws of nature, there's laws of physics, laws of thermodynamics, laws of biology. We must live according to those laws.
I'm so tired, man. I'm so tired. Like, we get it, Charlie. We get it. You are defining yourself as, I'm the right-wing guy. That's who I am. I'm Mr. Right-wing. I'm Mr.
And we get it.
Conservative
You
Republican.
hate trans.
I
We
get
get
it.
it.
I get it.
No,
I get it.
I
The
get it. You
posturing. I mean, this is nothing
Oh.
but, like, right-wing virtue signaling. I'm the right-wingiest of the right-wingers. I'm the pure conservative Republican, and I'm going to make those pure conservative Republican arguments to the point where you stretch something to absurdity. You stretch something to absurdity. All right, so let's go through this. He starts out by saying, you know, the trans issue is, quote, an issue of reality. We've been insistent against this idea you can change your gender or change your sex. So the idea that it's an issue of reality, yeah, I'd argue everything is an issue of reality. The nuance that exists with trans people in particular is that they may be born biologically male or female, but they feel like they are the opposite.
Because
So
gender
that's
and
why the
sex
term gender
are
exists.
separate.
It is
And
absolutely
gender is
accurate
also
to say
construct.
you can't change your biological sex. True, you're born with whatever you're born with, and that is your biological sex.
Well, you could
but
change your
gender
sex.
is the thing that is more fluid. And if you want to talk about reality, this is something that exists in reality. It exists in nature in the same way that gay people exist in nature. Some people just like the same sex. That's natural to a certain percentage of the population. That is reality. It is also reality that some people are born with one biological sex, but they feel like the opposite, and so they can identify their gender as the opposite. Like, it's not that hard to wrap your mind around the idea of a trans person. It's not that hard. You're born one way, you feel like the opposite, and so
They're getting better at comedy and it's making the left nervous.
you try to present as the opposite. That is your gender. Quite separate from your biological sex.
Sex and
Which
gender
is what
are
it is at
together,
birth.
though.
We all agree to that, or every reasonable person
Even though
agrees
it's
to that.
testicles,
But again, I don't know why are you so obsessed with this? I don't understand why you're so obsessed with this issue. Then he says there's a direct connection
Because we have
to
nothing
inflation
else
and
to
the
say.
trans issue. If you believe that men
Yeah.
can become women,
And we're
why wouldn't you believe that
Karens.
you can print wealth?
Yeah.
See, it's just too perfect because he's actually showing his own ignorance on the issue of inflation. Now, I will grant him this. I don't fault him for feeling this way initially because it's what I thought was going on initially. As soon as inflation really hit, I immediately went to my more economics-minded friends, and some of them are literally economists, and I asked them a bunch of questions because my layman's assumption was, well, Trump did a number of like COVID bailout things that largely went to corporations, but he did a number of COVID bailout things. Then Biden did a big COVID bailout thing. It's got to be because we're flooding the zone with money. We're flooding the country with money, that you're devaluing the currency, and so that's what's leading to inflation. That's what I thought. What they impressed upon me in no uncertain terms is that I was just dead wrong in what I thought led to inflation. That the real thing that's leading to the bulk of the inflation is the supply chain. And since then, I've read a number of articles that explain in a really clear way how it is the supply chain that is leading to inflation. Now, you could also say, Matt Stoller has written a number of pieces on this about how it's also monopolies that are leading to inflation. When you have more consolidation among very few companies in certain industries, they could pretty much agree to jack up the prices, and that's manifesting as inflation. Corporate greed is also bringing about inflation. We covered a story that was in Business Insider, I think, about how Walmart is jacking up prices, even of things that are really not impacted by inflation. They're using the excuse of inflation to say, oh, it's inflation, we had to raise the price of it, when really they're not. It's going to corporate profits. Stoller had a great article that I think 60% of inflation is attributable to corporate greed, which is astonishing when you think about it. So really, those are the culprits. Culprits are corporate greed, monopolization, and the supply chain, which got all screwed up because of COVID.
And not only that, too, the Russo-Ukraine war recently with, food prices. Since Russia and Ukraine are, represent, I think it was, up to, a third of wheat exports for crying out loud.
Yeah, because, he's a bread box.
Yeah.
It's the bread box of the...
bread basket.
Of the world.
Yeah. So, yeah, the reason why there's inflation is simply supply and demand. There is not much supply because COVID caused, everything to shut down. Remember all the lockdowns and all that. So there's a lot of demand, but no supply. That causes the cost of things to go up. Likewise, when there's a lot of supplies but no demand, that causes the price to go down. Simple economics. Once COVID is gone and all the supplies get back up to meet demand, the prices will start to go down.
Yep.
Charlie Kirk is implying here, if not outright saying here, that the real thing leading to inflation is the thing that I originally thought, which is we're just printing too much money. It's just that we're printing too much money. That's not true. And even it's such a confused point too, because I have no doubt there are definitely trans people out there who might be more on the Austrian economic side of the debate, like Austrianism versus Keynesianism. They might agree with the right-wing economic stuff. I'm sure there are trans people out there who would agree, and they'd be wrong, by the way, with Charlie Kirk that, that the printing the money is the problem, or there's too much spending and that's the problem. So it's not the idea that if you think this, you have to think that. It's not true. And also, printing money or government spending money is not always a bad thing. It can be bad in certain circumstances. It absolutely can be bad. But, Japan, for example, has their debt to GDP ratio is super out of whack. They're the worst in the world with their debt to GDP ratio.
If I remember correctly, last I heard, their debt's 4 to 5 times their GDP or something like that.
Oh.
Their debt is way, way higher in terms of their GDP than America's, for crying out loud. America's 100%. Theirs is several 100% higher.
Yeah. And they're doing all right. They're doing okay. So it's not, there was a lot of spending that went on during the New Deal era, and it was the correct thing at the time. So it's just it's lazy economic thinking, and it's lazy social issues thinking. And he's just slapping these two things together so he could do the thing I explained before, which is the right-wing virtue signaling posturing. I'm the most right-wing. I am the most pure of the conservative Republicans. And I'm just so tired. Honestly, I got to be honest with you guys. I'm tired of that everywhere. I'm tired of that on the left, too. The people who are I'm the leftiest of the left-wingers. I'm the purest of the left-wingers. And so, therefore, you can only take my word for things. It's even if I grant you the whole, I'm the leftiest of the left-wingers thing.
Huh?
Mm-hmm. And then, who cares? That doesn't equal being correct. Charlie Kirk posturing as the purest of the right-wingers here and slapping these two right-wing issues together is not, that doesn't mean you are correct. If anything, it means you're one of the more lazy commentators out there on the right. This is just low-hanging fruit for you. It's such a weird claim. There's a direct connection between inflation and the trans issue. You want to know why? Because the trans people are living in a fantasy world, and the people who brought about inflation are living in a fantasy world, bro. You get it? They're stupid. They're crazy. That's the problem. Is they don't think about facts, bro. Again, you want to talk about facts? What leads to inflation is what I just described leads to inflation. You want to talk about facts? It is a fact that the trans phenomena exists. There's some percentage of the population, albeit a small percentage of the population, that is born with a biological sex one way and they feel the opposite, and that's why we have this term gender, which allows for that nuance and identifying different ways,
because
etc., etc. So
conservatives
anyway,
keep
there you have
combining
it.
the two. They're separate.
God, man. I don't know how anybody watches this stuff and likes it. I really don't. Like, is there some, like, you know, self-identifying conservative college kid out there who watches this and thinks like, oh, Charlie, that was clever. You put the trans issue with the inflation issue.
Any boy might think it's
Your
good.
right-wing power level is through the roof, buddy.
He does.
I beg of people to think about issues in as objective a way as you possibly can. Don't just lump your lot in with
conservative,
I'm the right
that's
wing or I'm the left
impossible.
wing, and you know, and just sort of cosign all of the idiocy that's spewed. It's just, it's gross. It's just ugly. It's just pathetic to watch. And this is such a great example of that kind of thinking. The posturing is the most right-wing conservative Republican slapping together two right-wing causes and acting like you made some high-minded brilliant point. Not even close, dog. Not even close.
Ever since Adpocalypse,
That was funny watching Kirk being a transphobic piece of shit. So, what do you gotta say about that? Not only is he a transphobe, but an idiot on economics, to my no surprise.
Of course.
Oh my god, you dumb sack of shit. Oh, I see I got a notification on mail, so I guess the event's over. Can't wait to check the stats on that. So, anything you have to say about Kirk being an idiot?
Not surprised. Of course, he's the type of guy who thinks that everything wrong with the world is a fault of trannies. He called it.
I got a deal from Moxie Crocodile too. That's not good. Oh boy. Alright, so while I suffer on that one, let's get to some hope of rich fucks as unions keep winning. So anyways, we covered a while ago about Amazon and Staten Island having unions just now, and it was I think it was Starbucks too, because their CEO had a meltdown we watched I think in the last episode. Now Verizon is on that too now. And now let's see what this video Kyle covered, because I haven't watched yet, about Poland. Let's see about this one.
I am very happy to inform you that it appears like the revolution is here. So these new numbers are astonishing, man. I want to swim in these numbers. Poll. This is from More Perfect Union, by the way. More Perfect Union. Poll. Americans strongly support unionizing Amazon workers. 75% of respondents agreed with Amazon workers who say they need union representation in order to have job security, better pay, and safer working conditions. 75%. That is a stunning number, man. 75%. If you polled 10 years ago, even 10 years ago, there's no way it would be that high. There's no way it would be that high. So we have a supermajority of Americans have a favorable opinion of unionizing Amazon workers, according to a new poll. In a survey of nearly 2,500 Americans, 75% of respondents agreed with Amazon workers who say that they need union representation in order to have job security, better pay, and safer working conditions, the very demands listed on the Amazon Labor Union's website. The poll found that the union's argument was significantly more popular, roughly 20 percentage points higher than the management side of the argument that workers don't need a union because they already have good pay and benefits. Wow. The poll conducted by Blue Rose Research on behalf of More Perfect Union was in the field between April 7th and April 12th as news of the independent Amazon Labor Union's historic union election victory at a warehouse in Staten Island began to filter into mainstream news coverage. The More Perfect Union poll showed that Amazon's brand as a company is strong among consumers. So this is fascinating. A finding that tracks with other public polls. When we asked consumers who have shopped on Amazon over the last 3 months, 90% indicated they have a favorable opinion of the company. But interestingly, even among this very strong base of recent Amazon consumers, those who made a purchase in the last 3 months, 75% still supported the workers' arguments. I love this, man. I love this because, unfortunately, very common in today's day and age is very, very black and white thinking. You know, you see this all the time. It is all over Twitter, especially with partisanship
it's always
and
been like that in America.
And people are deep in their camps and everybody's very rigid in their worldview. But this is an instance where, like, the normiedom is winning. This is the rise of normiedom. So you ask anybody, really, hey, do you like Amazon? I mean, if you can click one fucking button and get whatever you want to your door in a pretty short time span, it's kind of hard for people to like overlook how awesome that is. Like
I can overlook it. It's a piece of shit site. I mean, piece of shit company that needs to be broken up and deserves those unions. And also, Bezos, I hope you enjoy, hopefully in the future, your taxes going up.
Bezos is one of those ones you just need to get rid of and reduce his wealth to negative infinity and just like jail or execute him.
But I will still use Amazon, but I'll still point out how much of a piece of shit place they are.
Anybody who's being honest is going to be like, yeah, I love that shit. Like, I love that. Of course I love that. Now, I would love an option where you press a button and you don't have workers having to shit in bags and piss in bottles in their car. Like, I would press that button every time. Like, get it to me as fast as you can without having to defecate in your car. Like,
the guy who looks to who bears the closest resemblance to Lex Luthor. So, yeah.
I would like that. But if I'm being totally honest, do I use Amazon? Of course I use Amazon. Like, everybody uses Amazon. What's the percentage of the population that uses Amazon? It is astronomically high. But even among the people who like Amazon and use Amazon, 75% of them are like, yeah, they should unionize. See, that's what I'm talking about, man. That's the nuance. And that's the honesty. Like, yeah, we all use Amazon, but also the workers should be unionized so that they get treated well. If it adds an extra half day or day for me to get my shit, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. If people get a living wage and they get good benefits and they get good health care, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. And I think most people are. It's like back when conservatives used to be like, well, if we raise the minimum wage, the price of a Big Mac is going to be raised by 82 cents. And like, everybody's like, okay, that's fine. And they're like, oh, I thought you were going to...
And the funny thing is, no study shows that actually happens anyway, 82-cent rise. But even if so, whoop-de-doo. People still get paid more overall, so win-win.
Say it wasn't. No.
And also, that pay rise would only be if those companies want to make the same profit margins before like the minimum wage increase. So they don't even necessarily need to go that high either.
No, we all feel that way. Like, what are you talking about? This number's amazing. Support for the unionizing workers was highest amongst young respondents who enthusiastically backed the effort to organize the world's largest e-retailer and the country's second largest employer. 83% of Americans aged 18 to 34 agreed with the union's argument, while 80% of respondents to 35 to 49 also agreed. Love that. Among Biden voters aged 18 to 34, the support for the union at Amazon sat at an astounding 91%.
How many young Biden voters
35 to 49
anyway?
were close behind at 90%. Biden's support among the same demographic has been dropping according to recent public polls indicating that embracing organizing workers can help Biden restore his public standing. Of course, that and about 1,000 other things he could do, which he's not doing. Even young conservatives agree with the union. Even young conservatives. 71% of Trump voters. 18 to 34.
Well, we
said
already
that
knew
Amazon
that,
workers
though.
needed a union.
Like we pointed out before, a lot of conservatives, including Trumpsters, actually are left-wing when it comes to economics, but they're turned away because of the social issues and they buy Trump's BS. That's why if Bernie got in past the primary, ran in the general election, he will get those people because he doesn't scare them off like a lot of people like AOC do.
And while 66% of the former president's supporters aged 35 to 49 agreed with that sentiment. Guys, middle-age Trump voters, 66% support the union. What are we talking about here? It's time, bro. It's time. We're going to unionize America. We're going to unionize the entire country. Like, a wave is coming. A wave is coming. Look, the change did not come through the traditional political route. It didn't. They're too corrupt. They're too ancient. But you know what? People looked around and they said, this is a matter of necessity. We got no way to improve our life.
Like one of the, and probably also like one of the very, very, very few things that COVID actually did positively, because I'm sure that's a big reason why too.
Than standing in solidarity and forming a union. And everybody looked at each other and they said, bet. And now we're watching that come to fruition, and it's beautiful. Millennial and Gen Z enthusiasm for workers seeking to exercise their rights tracks with overall trend lines in the United States. In September, Gallup reported that support for unions among Americans 18 to 34 stood at 77%.
That's kind of
Petitions
low,
to hold
if
union
anything.
elections surged in the first quarter of 2022, according to the NLRB, and many were fueled by young organizers at corporations such as Starbucks and universities across the country. Support for the Amazon labor union also cut across racial lines. 71% among white respondents, 83% among Hispanic respondents, 87% among black respondents, and 75% among Asian respondents.
I mean, no surprise.
This is what brings us together, man. Labor brings us together. This story is incredible. More perfect unions have been advocating for politicians of both parties, including the president, to show public support for the organizing workers. The new polling suggests it also is a stance that would be well received by the public. Well, www.noshit.net is what I say. Christian Smalls, what have you done? What have you gone and started, sir? Whatever it is, I like it. I like it a lot. I got one more here for you. Look at this. Amazon workers were greeted with this message on Easter Sunday. Business Insider calculated Jeff Bezos receives $152,000 a minute. Let me repeat that. $152,000 a minute. While workers slog through a 10 to 12 hour shift for the chance to win a $2 snack raffle.
$2,500. That's over $2,500 a second.
Yeah, guys, think about that. He's making $2,500 a second. A second. Forgive me for thinking that he doesn't deserve that much money. Sorry, I don't care.
Get back into your shitty ass spaceship and go to space, dog. That's what I have to say. He's so obnoxious. He's so obnoxious. Anyway. We're going to do it. Let's keep unionizing. Let's keep unionizing. This has the potential to finally break the back of neoliberalism and raise living standards and make life so much better for so many people, and I'm definitely here for it.
Hell yeah! And Vosh and other idiot leftists can go cry when I point out that we need to get conservatives to support this thing, because guess what? We win when we do that. You don't print socialist news. How about go fuck yourself? This is a win, and we're going to embrace it. So, what do you guys say about this awesome news?
Oh, it's beyond awesome. It really is, and I hope this wave drowns Bezos in them.
Along with Mayumi's roast on Twitter, if you saw it earlier.
I haven't seen those. Those I've got to see.
She'd been roasting them like the last few days. All right.
Oh,
so
you better send the mix through.
So now for some possible even better news. Bernie, me feel the burn 2024, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be very base, as we've been saying for like last plus year now. I think Bernie needs to run every single election until he either wins or he dies, and it's possible that maybe he could do that in 2024. So let's see Mike's video on it, since it was the first one I covered today. Kyle covered it later, but it's too late.
Well, we got some news that was, I guess you could say, unexpected. Bernie Sanders, after previously definitely saying he's not going to run for president again, is reportedly not ruling out a run in 2024, assuming Biden does not seek a second term. So as Sean Sullivan of the Washington Post explains, Senator Bernie Sanders is open to running for...
Guys.
Oh, even try to resurrect yourself from the grave if you do die to keep running.
This doesn't just apply to Bernie. This applies to every single progressive. In 2024, if Biden does run, he cannot just waltz in and just get it like that. He needs to earn it. We need to put up a fight to make him earn it.
If we can get Nina Turner into Congress, I'm going to say it right now, I also reckon, Nina Turner should probably run. Raphael Warnock, I reckon he's probably... I don't know if he's going to... I still reckon he needs to run as well.
That might be
he should probably be running.
That might be a little early for Nina to run after just being in Congress, though.
What have we got? Aside from Bernie, we've got nobody.
we got AOC, but she's gonna like turn people off and make it harder for herself. But other than that, I don't really know much.
In 2024, if President Biden declines to seek re-election, according to a campaign memo a top political advisor distributed to allies on Wednesday that was shared with the Washington Post, in the event of an open 2024 Democratic presidential primary, Senator Sanders has not ruled out another run for president, so we advise that you answer any questions about 2024 with that in mind, says the memo from Faz Shakir, a close Sanders advisor who was his campaign manager when he ran in 2020. The memo was shared by a person with direct knowledge of his contents on the condition of anonymity because it was not released publicly, and confirmed by a second person with direct knowledge of the contents. Shakir did not immediately respond to a request for comment. While it's frustrating this private memo leaked to the media, the central fact remains true, which is that Senator Sanders is the most popular office holder in the country, said Sanders spokesman Mike Casca when asked for comment. Casca and the memo based that assertion on a recent poll. So my understanding is this is a memo that they send out, a questionnaire rather, that they send out to candidates who are potential endorsement prospects. And one of the questions is, well, if we endorse you, would you endorse us in the event Bernie runs in 2024? Now, of course, there's a huge caveat here. This will all hinge on what Biden chooses to do. If he chooses to run in 2024, then the nomination is his. I mean, you can technically wage a campaign, a primary campaign against a sitting president, but primary campaigns against incumbent presidents are very, very difficult to pull off.
But they're not impossible,
and it's almost a way.
LBJ and Truman both ran for primaries when they ran for like a second, third term, and they did lose, so it is possible.
Waste of time. I mean, in theory, I think that every single sitting president should face a fierce primary. They shouldn't just automatically have the nomination of their party again. But the reality is that it would be difficult to pull off. So if Biden says, I'm running again, then that will basically close the door to Bernie 2024. But it's not a foregone conclusion that Biden will, and
also, that is another concern, too. If Biden hears about this, that Bernie might run. If he doesn't, I wouldn't be surprised if Biden says, fuck, I'll run regardless, just to make sure Bernie doesn't run.
in fact, run again. Now, there are reports suggesting that he's telling allies he fully intends on running. But 2024 is still a couple of years away, and a lot can change between now and then. So before I talk about whether or not I think this is a good idea for Bernie Sanders to run again, let me just say, in the event Biden were to run again, what specifically would he run on? I mean, in 2022, they're grasping at things to boast about. I mean, the good things that they were previously bragging about, which were objectively good, the child tax credit, the $1,400 checks, which were supposed to be $2,000.
I literally do not have the... I'm literally only holding being kept alive by the dark side of the Force.
Those are things that have come and gone. The child tax credit expired, so what exactly are you going to pitch to voters? Why should they come out and vote for you? How are you going to galvanize young people?
That's what if Trump runs and gets the nomination for Republicans, that's what he's just going to run on, just like in 2020. I'm not Trump. And... yeah. Like, I still think in the end, the only reason Biden won was because of COVID. Because Trump fucked up with COVID so badly, it just turned people away from him. Now, of course, we have the other angle with January 6th now, remember? So, maybe Trump scares people enough away that they'll be like anyone but him now, too. For that regard, too. Not necessarily COVID, but because of January 6th. So, you just don't know at all what could happen.
And the answer is, I don't think he can. I mean, Biden has proven that the centrist way, the third way, has failed. Now, the thought, I'm assuming from the Democratic Party, is that, look, we have to be more moderate because that's how we win. Because if we're too liberal, if we're too woke, too socialist, then the Republican Party is going to attack us and call us communists. Now, Biden in no way, shape, or form has governed as a lefty. But what are Republicans calling him?
They still call him a socialist, a communist, as we pointed out
earlier. And predictably so. So this whole strategy of trying to appeal to Republicans, trying to build bridges and extend olive branches to your political opposition, it has been a demonstrable failure.
The funny thing is, Bernie would actually get these people without even really necessarily trying, whereas Biden and others do try, and they fail so spectacularly.
Biden's approval rating currently has still not rebounded, and his approval rating was at 33% according to at least one pollster. Now, this is a reputable pollster, it's Quinnipiac, and it seems to be an outlier, but still, that should be startling to the Biden administration nonetheless, because that's almost at like George W. Bush levels when he was leaving office after the Iraq War. So, you know, the thing is that the Democratic Party has proven that their centrist way of doing things, triangulation, trying to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, has been a fucking catastrophic failure. It's been a palpable momentum killer. So what are you going to do? You're going to bring forward some Gen X version of Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, or Kamala Harris? And say, oh, well, we're going to do the same thing. I mean, I don't even know what Biden is fighting for. He ran on a public option, isn't even fighting for that. His signature agenda, Build Back Better, it seems like the left fought for it more than Biden fought for it, even though that's not what the left wanted. They wanted to expand, or Biden's plan was to expand Medicare. The left wanted Medicare for all. They fought for his agenda more than he did, and he didn't even get that accomplished because he couldn't bring people like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema to the table, and perhaps, you know, there would have been no way to get them to play ball. You could use the carrot or the stick approach. I've talked about strategies that he could implement that he chose to not deploy, but even if he failed, that's when you break out the pen. Where's my pen? It's good for visual aid. You break out the pen, you start signing executive orders. He still hasn't done that. So what have you done? And so the answer is he hasn't done enough.
Who died about 5 years ago, and yet is being propped up by the dark side of the force.
Careful,
Same with a lot of the Republicans and Pat Robertson.
Careful.
I mean, apparently Pat Robertson's wife died recently.
Careful, though. People will, idiot leftists will call you ableist for saying he's brain dead, remember? Yep.
He's failed. He's proven us lefties right. So the question is, who's next? Who's going to be the person to carry Bernie Sanders' mantle? And I've thought about this now for 2 years. And the answer is no one. The answer is no one.
I mean, what we talked about before, like, AOC's probably the best shot right now immediately after Bernie, but she has not good odds, mostly because of her inflictions. Nina Turner would probably be good, but she's probably too early to run right now when she's trying to run for Congress. But she probably has the better shot to be like Bernie more than like AOC. But other than that, I don't really know who else.
There's just nobody with the experience and political savviness that Bernie Sanders has. I mean, they're members of the squad who are potential presidential prospects, but the problem is that I don't want someone to just run because they have good policy ideas. That's certainly important, of course. But in addition to policy ideas, you need to know how to accomplish that agenda. You need to have experience as a lawmaker, and Bernie is the only one with the knowledge. And somebody who I think would actually fight even if things don't look good.
Which something AOC and others
So when it comes to this question of should Bernie Sanders run for a third time, if you asked me at the end of his campaign in 2020, my answer was a definite no. Because I can't take the heartbreak again. I can't take getting my hopes up and thinking that maybe this country would go in a better direction.
Have low standards like I did in 2020.
And then see my
no
dreams
standards at all.
That's why I wasn't surprised or sad when he lost, because I was expecting it, but you still have to do it no matter what.
My very eyes. I can't stomach that again. But with time, after sitting on it, I can't stomach the perpetual dread that I feel knowing that this country will never change at the current trajectory that it's headed on. If we have Pete Buttigieg in power, Kamala Harris in power, nothing fundamentally changes. We're going to continue to go back and forth. GOP, Democrat, GOP, Democrat. I've explained this cycle before. It's a death spiral where, you know, after Americans remember how terrible and psychopathic this death cult known as the Republican Party is, they vote for Democrats once again. But then once they realize how incompetent and feckless Democrats are, well, they get demoralized and they stay home. Republicans win again. And then once Americans are reminded yet again how psychopathic the Republican Party is, they come out and vote for Democrats again. And every single time we see this cycle happen, we're circling the drain. And so the thing that we have to do is break the fucking cycle. And the way that I see it, Bernie Sanders is the only person capable of breaking the cycle. I'm not saying that if he were to get elected, he'd be a panacea. I'm not saying that he will definitely be the next FDR. But what I am saying is that he's the only politician who I'm confident would actually try. Now, Bernie Sanders is not perfect. I don't think that he has the assertiveness that you need to be a politician, right? I think that he tries to kowtow to the Democratic Party, and I think that hurt him a lot in 2020. I think that if you run as an outsider, if you run as somebody who isn't trying to just play the establishment game as he did in 2016 more so, I think that that's how you're successful. But talking about strategy or not, that's not necessarily, you know, what I want to, tackle currently. The question is, should Bernie Sanders run again? Yes, he should. Yes, he should. I would prefer a 175-year-old version of Bernie Sanders compared to any Gen X milquetoast neoliberal who's going to do the same fucking thing.
Like if he could live as long as Pat Robertson's going, he's got three more presidential elections he can run at least.
Yep.
Off of this Bill Clinton mindset of trying to be centrist, trying to be ideologically directly in the middle between the far right and corporate Democrats. It's just not working. The country is deteriorating. Our planet is dying. We need someone who's bold, who makes a difference in people's lives so they don't fall for these dumb fuck culture war bullshit games that the Republican Party continues to play. Now, that's not to say if people had better lives and they had, an education, healthcare, all of a sudden racism would go away and homophobia would go away. But what I'm telling you is that people would overall be less susceptible to far-right radicalization if they saw that they had a government or a president who actually cared about them, because they would be less inclined to listen to dogmatic idiots like Donald Trump and other far-right ghouls, demagogues, if they knew that Bernie Sanders was trying and fighting. Now, Bernie Sanders is consistently the most popular politician in America, and that's weird. I feel like I don't understand how that works, because Americans can, on one hand, fall for the GOP's culture war bullshit, accept transphobia, accept all of these bad ideas, but still think that Bernie Sanders is good. I don't know how.
Hey, just look at all the states for his last several years where they keep voting for conservatives, yet they support minimum wage increase and stuff like that. Because they're stupid. They can't separate that. They don't realize that Republicans are against these things, but they still vote for them when they give them the opportunity.
How Bernie Sanders does that, but he does have crossover appeal, and he doesn't actually compromise his policies or morality.
Which is what I've been saying for years to idiot leftists that keep saying that if you don't talk about social issues literally every single second, you're some sort of homophobe or transphobe and other stuff like that.
His crossover appeal. I think that people just see him as a normal person who's fighting for a better future. So Bernie Sanders should absolutely run again. I would be in favor of it. Am I saying that I think he could win? No. I think that, I'm not going to get my hopes up again. But does it give me a tiny, teeny tiny, infinitesimal amount of hope at the prospect of Bernie Sanders running again and possibly doing a little bit to change this country, at least set us on a different trajectory? Yeah, it does give me hope. I can't remember the last time that I've been hopeful. It just feels like currently that, our fate has basically been determined. We've decided to put profit over people. We've decided to just kill the planet and go backwards. And living with that reality is really almost unbearable to me. I can't take it. So even if my dreams and hopes will be crushed yet again if he loses for a third time, is it worth it to have just a year during the primary of hope? Just a tiny bit of hope? Yeah,
No.
I think it is. Because it's a little bit of hope or non-stop fucking dread from failed politician after failed.
Never talk about hope until we actually have already won.
Failed politician, bullshitter after bullshitter. So let's fucking do it. I'd be all on board with Bernie 2024. Again, not saying I'd get my hopes up, but would I fight to make him the president? Fuck yes, I would, because there's no other person currently who could do it. Bernie's the one person, and as long as he's alive and is healthy cognitively and in physical good health, and he wants to do it, fuck yeah, I'm down. He doesn't have to do this. He doesn't have to subject himself to the abuse from the media or the smears from the Democratic Party establishment. He doesn't have to do this, but if he wants to, I will back him because I care about this country. And, you know, he's not going to be the one to change everything at this point in time, but all he needs to do is change the direction and show Democrats doing popular things, helping people, fighting the GOP. That's a winning strategy. If he could just show the next generation of congressional Democrats what to do, then I think that's more than I can ask for.
Yes, Bernie, please run again. Run in 2020. Yep, you keep running forever until you win or you die. So, what do you guys say?
Yeah. I agree. That's absolutely what should be done.
And guess what? Only one more of the Team Galactic Sages to find too. So now, on to the final one.
Sages, you mean?
Yep.
Noam Chomsky being ratioed.
So of course, Noam Chomsky, I don't think we've ever talked about him once on Last. He is
that's a big surprise now I come to think about it.
Yeah, Chomsky is a political person. I don't know the correct term for him, but he's like a big time progressive throughout the years. Like, everyone likes him and all that shit. Unfortunately, I lost a little bit of respect. I'm agreements with him like the last few years, especially when he was so fervent rioting with Biden, like shitting on people that didn't want to support him, which I was one of them. But he's still based in other ways. He actually is more of, because of the Russo-Ukraine war, he's more of on the side of progressives that want to try to end the war as quickly as possible. And of course, a whole bunch of... At first I thought maybe he was being an idiot, but when you read the stuff he says, it's actually more of the people that are freaking out are being idiots. So, let's watch it.
Yankees?
No, like people are like fervently supporting Ukraine.
Oh!
So Noam Chomsky has been doing a bunch of interviews recently. He spoke to Nathan J. Robinson of Current Affairs, and he also spoke to Jeremy Scahill of The Intercept. He's a busy man for being 178 years old, if I don't say so myself. So, first what I want to do, I'm going to get to a video in a second. It's, a piece of the interview he did with Jeremy Scahill of The Intercept. But before I do that, let me show you the thing he said to Nathan J. Robinson, which is leading to quite a bit of backlash online. And I would say it's, bipartisan backlash to some extent. But anyway, so somebody tweeted, "Sage old Noam Chomsky patiently explaining to Ukrainians, few of whom I suspect he's actually spoken to about this, that they really have no choice but to surrender and concede to Russia virtually everything it demands, quote, because that's just the way the world works. Disgraceful." So this is what somebody said, a guy named Vincent Artman. So let me read the passage that he puts in the tweet here, the passage that people are angry at him over. So Chomsky said the following: "So I'm not criticizing Zelensky. He's an honorable person and has shown great courage. You can sympathize with his positions, but you can also pay attention to the reality of the world, and that's what it implies. I'll go back to what I said before. There are basically two options. One option is to pursue the policy we are now following, to quote Ambassador Freeman again, to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. And yes, we can pursue that policy with the possibility of nuclear war. Or we can face the reality that the only alternative is a diplomatic settlement, which will be ugly. It will give Putin and his narrow circle an escape hatch. It will say, here's how you can get out without destroying Ukraine and going back to destroy the world. We know the basic framework is neutralization of Ukraine, some kind of accommodation for the Donbas region with a high level of autonomy, maybe within some federal structure in Ukraine, and recognizing that, like it or not, Crimea is not on the table. You may not like it. You may not like the fact that there's a hurricane coming tomorrow, but you..."
What?
Zelensky's already said, we've lost Crimea. We're not going to join NATO.
You can't stop it by saying, "I don't like hurricanes," or "I don't recognize hurricanes." That doesn't do any good. And the fact of the matter is, every rational analyst knows that Crimea is, for now, off the table, That's the alternative to the destruction of Ukraine and nuclear war. You can make heroic statements if you'd like about not liking hurricanes or not liking the solution, but that's not doing anyone any good. Okay, so I should note here that when he says Crimea is off the table, he's clearly not saying Crimea is off the table as in that will continue to be part of Ukraine. He's saying Crimea is off the table as in Russia's had control of it since 2014, and so it's going to be under Russian control either officially or in some unofficial way, but it will not leave Russian control.
Yeah, the only way Russia's going to lose Crimea is if you force them out. That's literally the only option.
So, a lot of criticism over this. I would say the aspect of the criticism that I understand is, if Noam Chomsky is talking about the war in Iraq, I don't think Noam Chomsky would say something along the lines of, Iraq needs to live in the real world and understand that you're going to have to make some giant concessions to the marauding imperialist invader. That wouldn't be the bulk of his commentary. Now, that's because he's from the U.S., and so he feels responsible for the actions of the U.S., and so he would put the burden more on us. But I do get the criticism in the sense that, large superpowers do messed up things. And you can, across the board denounce it when the U.S. does it, but also you can recognize when another large, powerful government is doing a messed up thing and put the burden and the onus on that country. So, I don't know if I'd call it a blind spot, but I'd say there is a problem with his thinking here, where, again, if it was the U.S. doing it, he would reserve the bulk of his commentary to bashing the aggression of the U.S., but when Russia is illegally invading another country and occupying it, he doesn't, there's not much of that. To an extent, it's like, well, of course they shouldn't do it, but it's also, hey, this is sort of the reality of the world, so, you're going to have to accept certain things here. And so, I do understand the criticism to some extent. However, I also think people are sort of misstating Chomsky's position, because you can take this little portion out of the interview and say, this encapsulates everything about Noam Chomsky's position. But that's definitely not true, because I watched that entire interview, or I watched a lot of the interview he did with Jeremy Scahill over at The Intercept. And now, let me show you that video so you get a more fully fleshed out take on what his position really is.
We can take time to talk about the broader historical context, and you've been discussing this a lot in other interviews. But I want to just start by asking you, is there any aspect of the U.S., NATO, and European Union response to this invasion that you believe is just? The weapons transfers to Ukraine, the sweeping economic sanctions and attempts to entirely isolate not only Russia and Putin, but ordinary Russians. Is there any aspect of the government response to this by the US, NATO, or the European Union that you agree with?
I think that support for Ukraine's effort to defend itself is legitimate. If it is, of course, it has to be carefully scaled so that it actually improves their situation and doesn't escalate the conflict to lead to destruction of Ukraine and possibly beyond. Sanctions against the aggressor are appropriate, just as sanctions against Washington would have been appropriate when it invaded Iraq or Afghanistan or many other cases. Of course, that's unthinkable given U.S. power. And in fact, the few times it has been done, the one time it has been done, the U.S. simply shrugged its soldiers and escalated the conflict. Well, that was Nicaragua, when the U.S. was brought to the World Court, condemned for unlawful use of force, ordered to pay reparations, responded by escalating the conflict. But so it's unthinkable in the case of the U.S., but it would be appropriate. However, I still think it's not quite the right question. The right question is, what is the best thing to do to save Ukraine from a grim fate, from further destruction? and that's to move towards a negotiated settlement. There are some simple facts that aren't really controversial. There are two ways for a war to end. One way is for one side or the other to be basically destroyed, and the Russians are not going to be destroyed. So that means one way is for Ukraine to be destroyed. The other way is some negotiated settlement. If there's a third way, no one's ever figured it out. So what we should be doing is devoting all the things you mentioned, if properly shaped, but primarily moving towards a possible negotiated settlement that will save Ukrainians from further disaster.
So that's his full position, and when I look at him describe his full position, I think that's very reasonable. I don't see much to pick apart there. So let's go through it. He says, support for Ukraine's effort to defend itself is legitimate. And then he adds the caveat, if it's carefully scaled and doesn't escalate. So I think what he means by that is, yeah, they have a right to defend themselves, and they can and should be armed, but don't, set up a no-fly zone for them and drag the U.S. into it. Don't... Essentially, don't give them false hope, and also perhaps don't arm the Azov battalion, the neo-Nazis who are officially part of
they've been close to pretty well. Azov and Krakow or something similar. One of the Russian neo-Nazi battalions wiped each other out in Mariupol. So, of course, according to Tanky, all Ukrainians are neo-Nazis. So, and since they're a neo-Nazi terrorist state and a puppet of the U.S. terrorist organization, they deserve to be genocided.
So I think he's just saying you can give them weapons to defend themselves, but don't go too far and perhaps give certain kinds of weapons that could escalate the conflict and draw in the West and make it devolve out of control where, nuclear war is on the table. So I totally agree with him on that point. And in fact, I think he's way more correct than the mainstream opinion, certainly in mainstream media, where they seem to believe give them any and all weapons and also set up a no-fly zone where NATO and or the US is shooting Russian planes out of the sky, which is direct military conflict between two nuclear armed powers, which would be an absolute catastrophe and disaster. So I agree with him on that. And I gotta be honest, I'm a little surprised that he's saying that he supports any weaponry going to Ukraine. But he does. He just said, I support Ukraine's effort to defend itself, and it's legitimate. You just need to make sure you carefully scale the weaponry and don't escalate it. Then he even says sanctions against the aggressor, by that he means Russia, are appropriate. He goes on to say, as it was, if people wanted to sanction the U.S. after what we did in Iraq, that would have been appropriate. Now, I will add the little asterisks here, and this is just my position, but I'm sure he would agree if somebody were to bring this up to him. I don't support any of the sanctions that hurt the Russian population. I would try to target the sanctions as much as possible to Putin, his inner circle, the military, the oligarchs. And really, as a matter of principle, I think that's the best response. Even if it does...
Unfortunately, like we said before, they really don't have much of a choice. Because you really can't just ignore them. And also, if you do sanction them, that might piss off the population to rise up against Putin, which is really needed. So as much as you'd want to avoid sanction the population, you really don't have much of a choice.
Doesn't lead to quote-unquote positive outcomes. You can't just let one country invade another sovereign country and sit there and watch it. Now, again, I'm consistent on that because I say the same thing when the U.S. does it. Nobody should just sit there and watch the U.S. commit war crimes and invade sovereign countries. It's wrong when we do it, so it's wrong when Russia does it. So there should be standards and rules and laws that are upheld in the process of that. So Chomsky doesn't say here that he supports or doesn't support the sanctions against the people of Russia, but I assume he'd agree that going after the people of Russia is way too far because that's just collective punishment and they're innocent bystanders. They didn't do anything wrong, and so you shouldn't crack down on them. But look, when you look at the first comment that I shared with you from the interview with Current Affairs, you would have no idea that this is what Chomsky believes as well. To some extent, arming Ukraine to defend themselves, and to some extent, sanctioning Russia are totally legitimate. So now you see maybe the backlash was way overblown, and people were strawmanning him to some extent in the sense that it's misleading to just show that comment of his without giving the rest of his position. Then he goes on to say there's going to have to be a negotiation and some diplomatic settlement, effectively because the other options are what? Like, what are the other options? Endless escalation to eventual World War III? That's a potential, another option.
Or Ukraine somehow gets completely
or
destroyed.
An endless 10-year war where, you know, Russia is just bogged down in Ukraine and you get the death toll rising nonstop.
I mean, that is
and
possible
so
too.
when you look at all the real options that are on the table, yeah, it makes sense. We should want to have a negotiation, want to do a diplomatic settlement. And yes, the nature of diplomatic settlements, especially in situations like this, nobody's going to be happy. Nobody's going to be happy. You know, Ukraine, of course, isn't going to be happy. Russia is not going to be happy. But we need to find a way out. Like, we need to find a way out because we're really playing with fire here.
Problem is, a lot of people just don't want to. Problem is, a lot of people just don't want to concede the idea of negotiating with Russia. Like, that to them is just too much to stomach, basically. Even though it really is the only option.
And so, the other point though is one that is the most complicated to me, because what would that settlement look like? That's the question. Well, I've reported to you guys based on a number of things I've read, and a number of things that have been reported, that Zelensky had put on the table basically all of Russia's main asks. So, you know, Russia's main asks: neutrality for Ukraine, as in, you know, don't be part of NATO and perhaps don't form other alliances with the West. That's one of the things on the table. Zelensky had a number of times conceded on that front and said, look, it is what it is. Even if I want to be part of NATO, we're not going to be part of NATO because there's a roadblock within NATO. So, yes, we're going to be neutral. So, total concession on that. The other thing is the Donbass region. Some settlement for the Donbass region, either where you have the two independent republics actually become independent republics, or you have them become part of Russia, or a certain percentage of them becomes part of Russia. Now, he has previously put that on the table as well. And then the other thing, of course, is Crimea. And there were indications in the press that Zelensky had also put that on the table. And so on the main prongs, the one that they cannot give in on under any circumstances, you know, total disarming. That's insane. Nobody would give in to that, nor should they. Okay, but all the other things are on the table. So some sort of solution would look like that. But now I've since seen headlines talking about how certain things here are now off the table. So if Zelensky had put, particularly I think the Donbass region and Crimea, they were put on the table, and now I've read some headlines within the past 2 or 3 days that they're off the table. So I don't really know now, you know, what truly is on the table and what isn't on the table. But any sort of deal is going to include most of those things, or all of those things. I will say there's one response to Chomsky here which could be correct, but we just have no way of knowing. Which is an argument you could make if you disagree with Chomsky is, look, you want to have some diplomatic settlement, right? And you want to enforce that and get relative stability and peace. You know, any reasonable person would understand that. But what if you do that and then Russia doesn't stop? What if you do that and you can't appease Putin because he's got his mind set on further territorial expansion? And so then you have a situation where it would be fair to call everybody who is pushing most aggressively for peace Neville Chamberlain. And it's like, you guys are naive. Look at what you did. You made a deal with the devil, and then now the devil is doing what the devil does. And so that's the only critique I could see of Chomsky that is actually sound, in the sense that you are accepting all of the contours and nuances of his argument, and you accurately represent his position, and then you respond to it. Now, this is not the critique I see coming against Chomsky. People are not making that critique, but that is a theoretical critique you could make if you disagree with him. But my position on it is, you got to take the chance. Like, you got to give peace a chance. You have to try to get some sort of settlement here. And again, it's not going to make anybody happy, but it's doable, and it's the least bad of all bad options. But I will say, it's not my decision to make, right? Now, the U.S., our negative role in this is that we don't appear to be offering an off-ramp. We don't appear to be wanting a diplomatic settlement. But you could argue, Putin doesn't want it either, right? Or else he would have already made it if some of those things were actually on the table. But my take is you have to try. You have to try to give peace a chance, because the other options are just significantly worse. And look, if we get to the point where we make a deal, we think the deal's enforced, and then within a year, Putin tries to do more territorial expansion, well, then the argument that he was unappeasable is perhaps totally legitimate, and we'll have to reevaluate at the time. But where we are right now, I don't think we can come to that conclusion definitively, and so we really have no other options. So ultimately, what I would say is, I largely agree with Chomsky here. I largely agree with Chomsky. It is up to the Ukrainians, and here's what I think will happen, hopefully. At some point, they will make some sort of a deal, and that could come relatively soon, which would be positive because fewer people would die, or maybe the fighting drags on for years.
That's more likely
and
to happen right now.
And then after
though.
years, everybody's appetite for war subsides, and they're in like a permanent stalemate to some extent.
Unless it's earned, basically.
And then you get that peace deal.
Yeah.
So, but again, what I favor is not really as relevant as what the people on the ground in Ukraine favor. And so you just sort of have to let the peace process run its course and see where it leads. I could understand why people would say, hey, Chomsky, who are you to make this choice? If they want to fight to the last Ukrainian, that's their prerogative. But I think he's coming at this from the...
He's not saying it, though. His philosophy is he just wants people to stop being killed and to prevent World War III happen as soon as possible. That's his motivation on it. You guys are putting the different motivation on him.
Perspective, he wants to see less death and less destruction.
Yeah.
And I understand that. So, yes, that first comment, there are some criticisms that I think are fair. But when he fleshes out his entire position, I really don't see much wrong with his position at all. Because he says he supports Ukraine's effort to defend itself, and arming them to some extent is legitimate, but it has to be, proportionate or proportional, whatever the word is. Sanctions against the aggressor, Russia, are appropriate, as it was against the U.S. when we did Iraq. Although I would say, don't go too far where you hurt civilians. And again, he wants a negotiated settlement because what are our other options? Drag the war out for years and years and years, or escalate towards World War III? Those are unthinkable. So, again, the weird part of it is Zelensky... Previously, there was reporting he did put the Donbass region on the table for some sort of a deal. He did put Crimea on the table for some sort of a deal, and he's already conceded on neutralization. The only thing he's not backing off of is you must disarm, which he's right to not back off of that. That was the previous reporting. Now the new reporting is those things are actually off the table, or certain of those are off the table. So I don't know where we're at in the peace process. And I know that the U.S. is really not interested too much in peace because we're not providing an off-ramp for Putin. And arguably Putin's not at all interested in peace right now either because... if he wants it, he could just withdraw. But he's not doing that because he still has, some long-term goals here. There is reporting he's backed off of Kyiv in particular. I mean, yes, they got bogged down there. They couldn't capture it like they wanted to capture it. So now they're settling for less, namely probably something involving Donbass and Crimea. But anyway, there you have it. Those are Chomsky's comments. There was a big backlash and a dogpile. But when you listen to his full fleshed-out position... While I have little disagreements with it here and there, I think it's largely reasonable.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor.
That's what happens when you're irrational, emotional, not thinking and reading about shit, like what Chomsky said, because what he said was pretty much...
And when you're also terminally online.
Yeah, because what he said was pretty reasonable in that regard. And, so yeah, we got to say about it.
Quite interesting.
And, here's some things that a lot of people need to understand. A lot of stuff... is nuanced in a lot of ways. Here's something that they will people that went after Chomsky will never concede on. Yes, America is also responsible for this. There's no way around
the whole world is.
Yeah. See, a lot of these people want to make it like Russia is only responsible for it. Like, it's only them, nothing else.
Only the US and NATO, and that is why Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia should pay for that with their sovereignty.
Both sides have their own responsibility into this, and you have to consider that. Likewise, you have to also concede Russia does have a fair, legitimate reason to think that NATO expansion is wrong and a threat to them. Likewise, all the Eastern European countries, however, they also have a legitimate threat to fear Russia, and their reason to want to go into NATO is also legitimate. You have to all recognize this and find some way to accommodate everything, which a lot of times people just don't want to concede on either one of them. So yeah, the people that went after Chomsky, you guys really are just brain dead stupid. Like, he really said nothing at all that deserved it.
Yeah.
Alright, so I think
That's
we...
it.
What?
I think that's all the subjects.
Yep.
we
So
got today.
that will wrap it up here. So see you guys next time for the last week. The next week's episode will be the last one of April. So see you guys then.